I beat Oxygen Not Included in 100 days with only one duplicant. Some of you might think there is no such thing as beating this game, but if there is one ultimate goal that qualifies, it has to be the Great Escape. Charge up the opener located in an outer planet, and send a rocket to breach the mysterious temporal tear. But how could we complete such a grand scheme in time with only one duplicant? We will definitely need some special approaches to boost our efficiency. The first secret technique would be to activate Red Alert. This might sound like an extreme noob move because it only squeezes out a little more extra work time at the cost of messing up the personal time for the duplicants, and even worse, it generates a significant amount of stress. But what if I tell you keeping Mei stressed is exactly the key to this run? We'll come back to this in a moment because I am doing the second move that also looks very noob, opening up the water pool and flood my base. But by mopping the water like this, I am able to collect almost the entire water pool into bottles and store them on this tile. This will save me a lot of time later by not having to run back and forth to fetch water from a pitcher pump. I can just build the supercomputer that consumes water next to these bottles and enjoy almost zero delivery time. It will take a little time for most of the water to naturally spread to this tile before Mei can finish the mopping mission. In the process, Mei would have gained a lot of stress due to soggy feet and chilly surroundings since it's standing inside water, but that's also exactly what I was hoping for. So why is stress good in this run? This has to do with the traits of the duplicant. For a regular starting duplicant, we could pick one positive special trait that can help the dupe throughout the run, and since we have only one duplicant, this pick is really important. You might have thought of the loner trait, which gives +4 to every attribute when the dupe is alone, which is automatically true in this run. But I'm taking this to the next level and picking the duress to impress trait. This trait gives +7 to every attribute, which is really huge, but it requires the duplicant to be above 60% stress to activate. That's why I need the Red Alert as a huge stress source for Mei to reach the stress state as quickly as possible. May spend almost an entire cycle mopping water, but it's better to do the trivial tasks at the beginning when the attribute boost hasn't activated yet, and do the more attribute-dependent jobs later when we successfully reach 60% stress. Fortunately, or I should say unfortunately, there's a free New Hope buff in the first 3 cycles that gives stress relief and messes with our plan. But here comes another stress source. Making a mess as well as holding a full bladder is sure very stressful, although it's sad that Mei has only reached 30% stress after the 3 noob actions we have taken. Maybe gaining stress isn't as easy as we think after all. While waiting for the stress transition, let's set up the initial research stations and the manual generator. It's a popular choice to place the stations next to the printing pod to enjoy its free light for a research speed boost. However, research stations consumes dirt, and the majority of dirt tiles are located to the left. Since this is a solo run, Mei has to do both research and dirt delivery all by herself. I would prefer to place the stations close to the dirt to minimize delivery time, and maybe add a light source later on. The stations are still technically in the same room as the printing pod though, and we are qualified to enjoy the laboratory room bonus. The very first research I will work on is the power regulation. It can unlock the jumbo battery, and even more important, the power discharger, which can convert metal power banks into power and free Mei from running on the manual generator. But now, the drawback of Red Alert is starting to show. Duplicants will not go to eat or sleep during Red Alert. Not sleeping is rather an advantage, because the duplicant can indeed stay up and work forever with no problem. On the other hand, not eating is really serious, since she will just strictly obey the Red Alert and literally starve to death. I need to temporarily disable the Red Alert so Mei can replenish her calories. You could probably imagine how much problem and chaos the Red Alert would create in a normal colony. But since Mei is the only dupe we need to take care of, this kind of micromanaging is very feasible, and I would consider this to be another big advantage of a solo run. Red Alert is now back online, and we should be reaching 60% stress at any moment. At the end of Cycle 3, we finally made the first goal and activated the Duress to Impress ability. Let's take a look of its effect. Every attribute besides piloting is now at least 7. This means digging and building can now be done at about triple speed. May started as a dual researcher and builder. Since each science attribute boosts researching speed by 40%, May can now research at almost 6 times as fast. Now the stress threshold is reached, maybe I should consider building an outhouse. But first, let's set up the power dischargers and craft some power banks. Each discharger can only draw 60 watts of power from the inserted power bank. This is a rather low amount, but it really suits the early game when the power consumption is also low, and not waste too much power before we have a smart battery to automate power production. The power banks themselves still take time to craft, but if we divide the amount of energy per power bank by the crafting time, the efficiency would be at least 2000 watts. That is way much higher than making May running on the hamster wheel for a mere 400 watts. It's kinda funny, May is now at a negative morale. This is actually impossible on the default schedule, and it happens only because I removed the downtime for May completely. Since I have to maintain the stress state for the rest of the game, it could sometimes be helpful being in low morale. The stress reaction happening at 100% is still a significant waste of time, on top of being detrimental, so I would prefer to keep the stress level somewhere between 65% and 90%. This is gonna be the weirdest definition of stress management you would ever see. So finally, in Cycle 4, here comes the outhouse. I'm not gonna making a latrine room out of it though. I'm not worried about food poisoning, and that mere 1 morale isn't really needed in this run. You might have noticed, the printing pod offer has been available and ignored for quite a while already. Yup, I know what some of you are thinking, but I am not going to take advantage of care packages for free resources in this run, and apparently I can't print a new duplicant. So, sorry to say, but y'all gotta bear with me on this shiny printing pod in the rest of the game. The metal power banks are powerful, but they eat through the metal ore supply pretty fast. I'll need to dig some more metal tiles and think about more power sources needed for the Great Escape. So, speaking of the Great Escape, if I were to conclude its requirements in 2 words, it would be rockets and radiation. Rockets are required to reveal star maps and to settle new planets. We need at least 5 printing pods built on different planets, and we can easily build 2 at home and on the teleporter planet, so we will at least have to find 3 more planets to settle. Later on, we will have to find the Temporal Tear Opener, which is located on the Tundra planet. The Temporal Tear Opener requires massive amount of radiation to be charged in a reasonable time, so that's what I need to prepare in advance. Finally, we apparently have to send the rocket into the Temporal Tear. We have an advantage on this part though, and we will talk about this later. The supercomputer is ready and placed near the tile we were mopping in Cycle 1. It's so convenient that the entire water pool can be collected in this single tile. Now let's add a simple ceiling light, and the entire research setup for this run should be completed. Usually, the starter dupes should get the first skill point at around Cycle 7, maybe in Cycle 6 for researchers, because science stats speeds up experience. But May has an exceptional 14 to science stats, so she got the skill point at Cycle 5 to access the supercomputer. But why is the room no longer a laboratory? It somehow became too large in size. Must be some oxalite tiles over here, completely sublimed, and became an empty space. Not a big deal, let's just fill in some tiles. It's about the time to give May a cot and barracks. We aren't gonna be in permanent red alert, since the stress is already at desired level. While not in red alert, a better sleep quality is still nice to have. After the barracks is done, May is now exactly matching the morale requirements, and this corresponds to a slight stress relief at 5% per cycle. I wish there is a morale level, that gives exactly 0% stress, so the stress management can be easy. It's not possible though. The stress either goes down at sufficient morale or goes up at even 1 insufficient morale. For now, the best solution is probably to stay at this morale level and activate Red Alert when the stress is about to drop below 60%. There's a lot of digging that needs to be done later, digging to the surface for rockets, to the bottom for uranium ore, and to find the teleporter for traveling to the second planet. But first, I have to dig to the second water pool so I can pump them for electrolyzing. The electrolyzer won't accept bottled water, so the pool that we mopped in the first cycle cannot be used. I do not plan to build a compact and closed electrolyzing system, but rather an open one. So I would also need a sufficiently large ceiling to collect the hydrogen product and a wide corridor for the oxygen to diffuse to other parts of my base. The other buildings needed for the electrolyzing system are gas pumps and canister fillers. Some of the generated oxygen and hydrogen is pumped into the canister filler, and we can just slide the capacity bar like this to store the gas into bottles. Later on, these bottle gas would be very convenient to transport to outer space, so May can work in a nice oxygenated atmosphere and enjoy the power from hydrogen generators. Remember May has an astonishing science stats of 14 at the beginning? I kinda wonder how much time it takes her to actually complete the research jobs. It took May about 11 seconds to complete 5 points of research. Consider we are playing at triple speed, the actual time is about 34 seconds. So, assuming May is researching full-time, without having to do any other jobs or personal needs, it takes about 340 seconds, or slightly more than half a cycle, to research this technology. According to the wiki, it takes about 6,600 novice and advanced research points to finish the entire research. That's about 45,000 seconds, or 75 cycles. In practice, it will sure take way longer than that when we have other jobs to do and have to survive in the meantime. This means, even with May's excellent science ability, researching is still an extremely time-consuming job for one duplicant. If we tried to get an even higher science dupe to research everything, the return would be diminishing and not really practical. What I should do is to cut out most non-essential researches. Although Great Escape is one of the ultimate goals in Oxygen Not Included, there's a lot of flexibility in the Spaced Out DLC, and with enough knowledge of the game, it's possible to complete it with only the first few tiers of basic researches and the most basic rocket. It's about the time to do more digging and explore further. We have found the teleporter down here, but there is no rush to use it, since we have to also find the supply teleporter to activate, so we can transport resources between these two planets. One of the best things that can be found in the teleporter planet is a cryopod that has a frozen friend inside. The frozen friend is a dupe that comes with 3 free skill points once defrosted, which is very handy in a lot of my speedruns. However, we can't touch the frozen friend in a solo run apparently, so the teleporter planet is not much more than a planet with some free food and a building site for a mini-pod. It turns out, the output supply teleporter is just below the dupe teleporter. That's conveniently close, but I will still need to dig to the core for the uranium ore eventually anyway. Wait a second, what are these dartles doing? Are they trying to drown themselves? I know pips can attempt to plant under liquid and have similar behavior, but I have no idea why dartles will mess around like this. Back to home, I want to research the agriculture tech, but not for the reason you might guess. With only one duplicant to support, there should be enough wild food to survive the entire run, so I am not planning to plant anything. The thing I really want to unlock is the radiation lamp. It's an excellent but overlooked and underrated radiation source, and I'll show my personal setup later. I just suddenly realized that May's stress level dropped below 60 already. I gotta activate Red Alert again. There's apparently no notification when the stress level drops, since that's normally regarded as a good sign, so I could only keep track of it myself. Unfortunately, May hasn't eaten for quite a while, and the starvation warning hit right when red alert starts. I have to carefully monitor the calories and dismiss the red alert so May can eat before it's too late. It is time to activate the supply teleporter before going to the second planet. The surroundings on the way isn't very friendly. May can easily get sopping wet and chilly surroundings when stepping in the cold brine or eye irritation when contact with chlorine. Fortunately, stress isn't strictly bad in this run. As long as the stress doesn't reach 100%, everything would be fine. Supply teleporter successfully activated. The large uranium ore deposit is also just right under it. Now, I just have to finish all the remaining researches in one go while May still possesses the field research skill. We need to do every job with one single duplicant, but we only have limited amount of skill points to spare. So later on, I would likely need to reset May's skill so she can do astronomy, scouting, and pilot a rocket. Resetting skill is a really lengthy process, so I would want to prevent switching skills back and forth. There's not many researches left, but they are slightly more advanced and would take quite a few time. I need to research Space Program, Crash Plan so I can unlock the rocket platform and the Trailblazer, and then Material Research. More material research so I could generate rat bolts to charge the Temporal tear opener, Pressure Management, Improved Ventilation, and Advanced Gas Flow so I can unlock the carbon dioxide engine. Finally, Gas Distribution so I can unlock the canister drainer, which allows me to extract the gas from bottles easily. It's the game changer that makes gas management much smoother. Just one final check of completed research, and it is time to enter the next stage. Basic automation, gas distribution, basic plumbing and electrolyzer, basic carbon dioxide rocket and rad bolt generation. Yes, that's all we need for a nice great escape. Let's say goodbye to the research stations and hop in the teleporter. Here we are at the teleporter planet, and we are welcomed by starvation and fatigue. Probably not the best time to arrive, but we do have some free food to start with, so there's nothing to worry about. Wait a minute, May has been hit by food poisoning as well. We haven't been washing our hands since the beginning, so can't complain about it. May would suffer from a faster stamina drain and have to relieve more frequently, but we will live with it. Making a mess during digging is not a big deal either. This planet has a lot of natural polluted water pool anyway. We are only taking a brief stop at this planet for a few missions. Build a mini pod and find lead to transport back to home. Maybe also grab some free food if I can. It will take a few cycles to complete lead transport mission, so some basic infrastructure is still needed. Now that May already has learned some skills and morale requirement, the situation is different from Cycle 1. We really need to provide some morale boosting rooms, such as the mess hall, so May wouldn't trigger the stress reaction at 100% stress. Actually, with all these environmental debuffs, the stress crisis is already imminent. We don't even have time or power to set up an emergency massage table, so the only way we could revert this is to force May to sleep. While sleeping, May would get a 20% per cycle stress relief. Hopefully, this is enough to save her from the stress reaction. Yes, we stopped the stress from growing past 98%. With the outhouse completed and sufficient morale provided, we should be temporarily safe for now. I still need some power to enable the conveyor loader and transport lead back to home. I wish I could skip the manual generator step and just use metal power banks, but I still have to manually run the wheel to have the initial power for crafting power banks. It took me almost 2 cycles to set the power system up to build a mini pod and a skill scrubber. This means it's a 2 out of 5 planets settled for the Great Escape requirement, and we will have to bear with another shiny printing pod that we won't ever print from it. After lead transporting is done, we could focus on rockets, scouting, and ultimately the Temporal Tear. Wait a second, why is the Temporal Tear already revealed? It's of course not some kind of hack, but because I'm playing on the latest DLC, the Prehistoric Planet Pack. One of its main feature is this big meteor called Demolier, which would destroy our home planet if we can't shoot it down in time. This sounds like a serious threat, but there's an unexpected advantage for us. Demolier is spawned from the Temporal Tear, and its full path is revealed at game start. This means it's actually a bliss by revealing the Temporal Tear to us for free. If we manage to finish the Great Escape before Demolier hits, which is 200 cycles by default, then the threat means nothing to us. I once thought I have to reset my skills right now, because I need the second level of digging skill to excavate abyssalite that separate lead from me, which is these tiles in blue. But not all world generations are perfect. Lucky for me, there's a leak in the abyssalite layer to the right. Lead itself is soft and does not require any skills to dig, so I don't have to worry about resetting skills for now. However, there is one more problem. The oil biome is hot, and May would scald if we just go in unprepared. If she has an Atmos suit to put on, the scalding can be prevented, but producing and setting up Atmos suits would take too much time. Actually, I got an idea here. There's some natural polluted water pools up there. Some might see it as an annoyance, but I find it very helpful. By draining the water into the oil biome, the temperature down here drastically dropped, and the environment becomes cool and survivable. This amount of water might not be sufficient to cool down the entire hot oil biome, but it will take a long time before the temperature averages out, and May can easily finish gathering lead before it gets hot again. In order to launch a basic rocket, the most expensive and critical part is to build a rocket platform. It requires refined metals to construct, and we will need a lot of these to construct multiple rocket platforms on outer planets. That's why I'm trying to excavate lead from this planet as free refined metal source, because refining so much metal in the regular way would require extra researches, power, and operation time. Before we go, I'm also grabbing the free food from this planet back to home. These swamp char hearts have a low food quality, but they have an infinite shelf life, so they are actually quite good for our upcoming space missions. They can also be shipped with the supply teleporter, which is quite convenient. Alright, time to get back to home for rockets. The first thing we're building is a fridge. It's not really because we want to prevent food from spoiling, but the food from the second planet is still sitting on the ground down there. I would want to retrieve them all in one go, instead of watching May going to the bottom every time she wants to eat, and we're also retrieving lead as well. Even with the bonus from Duress to Impress trait, May could only carry about 500 kilograms of material per time. I have sent about 9 tons of lead from the teleporter, so it will take quite a while to collect all of them. But before that, I would want to expand the electrolyzer system and automate the power supply with hydrogen generators. I've made some estimation on the amount of hydrogen I need for the Temporal Tear mission, which is about 1,000 kilograms of hydrogen. I hope I would accumulate enough hydrogen during the time I am preparing on rockets or other materials. If not, I would deactivate the hydrogen generator and replace with peat burner to save all the produced hydrogen. Let's activate this research portal and take a look at the introduction of Demolier. Honestly, we aren't very interested in Demolier itself because we are planning the Great Escape before its impact, but our planet's surface would be revealed in the process, and that is a helpful information to know. It turns out that the surface is just a few screens away from us. Let's start digging for our rockets. We want to go straight up, but it would help to occasionally dig sideways, so we can collect some minerals nearby that would be handy for building ladders. Digging and building so many ladders will sure take some time, but I want to show 2 different tricks that might save us some time. Rockets usually need a clear path to surface to launch and operate, but if we build a telescope in a rocket interior, it would be considered having line of sight to space no matter where the rocket is located. We could definitely scout with the regular way, but this trick would help if you want to scout the star map before even reaching the surface and save some travel time. Later on, I will be doing another simple operation that allows us to fully operate a rocket in a straightforward way, but without going back and forth between the surface and home. So, for a quick telescope scouting rocket, we merely need a rocket platform and a nose cone. We don't need other rocket parts that are normally required, since we are not going to actually launch this rocket. In the rocket interior, the available building space is really small, but we can remove the pre-built rocket control station, which is only needed for launching the rocket, so we can manage to fit a telescope, a large discharger, and have one column left for a lamp and gas vent. We can't really afford to generate oxygen inside, but we already have a lot of oxygen stored in canisters outside, so we can conveniently use a canister drainer to release and pipe the oxygen into our interior. Finally, the power is supplied by the power banks inside the large dischargers. With oxygen and power settled, we now have a small but nice astronomy station. What we have here is a small version of telescope, and it could only reveal the part of star map at most 3 hexes away from it. This could reveal 3 unknown locations for us, and hopefully one of them should be the 3rd planet, which is part of the inner planet ring. There's 30 hexes in total to scout, so even with our superior science stats, it's gonna take a few cycles. Would this question mark be the 3rd planet? Nope, it's an amber field containing resources from the new DLC. What about the 2nd question mark? Nope, no luck. I'm planning to research the entire area within this radius of 3 anyway, so it's okay. Alright, we have indeed found the 3rd planet here. Now we have to make an actually launchable rocket and start gathering the resources for the space missions. A common way of thinking is to dig out a narrow passage to the surface and place the rocket there. However, since we have only one duplicant, there would be way too much running back and forth between home and the surface to build the rocket interior and to carry all kinds of required resources to the rocket. So what I am planning to do is to clear out a wider passage all the way from my base to the surface, wide enough to allow my rocket to pass through. This would of course take an even longer time to complete the initial digging, but I think this would save me more time later with a very short and convenient delivering distance to the rocket. It took me 7 cycles to get this close to the surface, but there's a serious problem. There's a block of obsidian sitting on the path I am digging. They are very hard and require the 3rd level of digging skills to excavate. May's skill points are really valuable, and I don't really want to waste a point just for this little block, and I don't want to go through extra skill resetting process either. So the new adjusted plan is to reserve these 3 columns to the right for the rocket launch path. First, we will still build a ladder and clear out the surface tiles normally. Then we will destroy these ladders that will block the rocket launch. We have to carefully deconstruct in the order of top to bottom, otherwise we could be stuck and cannot deconstruct all the ladders without having to build more ladders. The air up here is really thin, and May is already holding her breath. I better be careful and quick and restore the access back to safety. The hardest part is already finished, and the job would only get easier as our working zone gets closer to home. I could already envision the rocket launch. Duplicants could only dig 2 tiles to the side, so they can't directly reach the 3rd column farthest from the ladder. But by carefully preserving some natural tiles, they can serve as a stepping stone to dig the 3rd tile, and they themselves can be cleared later. Clearing the tiles like this is kind of satisfying, so satisfying that May is almost leaving the stress state, and I have to bring back the red alert. This digging project will mess up my barracks, but I can definitely reshape it later. Time to build the actual rocket. I would need a Trailblazer module to land May onto the new planet surface. If there were two duplicants, they can both land with their own Trailblazer, and those could be deconstructed to provide enough material for a rocket platform that allows the rocket to land. But May is all by herself. The only way I could land is to drop refined metals onto the planet's surface with an orbital cargo module, so I have enough materials to build a rocket platform once May landed on the surface. The carbon dioxide engine is really low tier and have a low available building height. Fortunately, it's still able to fit these two modules, along with the nose cone and engine itself. I want to gather enough fuel for all the trips I need in advance, and that would be really a lot of carbon dioxide needed. So, it's the time to utilize the peat generator. It doesn't generate a lot of power, but it could replace the hydrogen generator and save more hydrogen for our space missions later. The important part is that it generates a lot of carbon dioxide, and that's really helpful for our rocket missions. With the help of canister filler, the carbon dioxide and the random chlorine that leaked into my base during the grand digging could be collected and sorted into gas canisters. It will take some time to generate enough carbon dioxide and hydrogen for the space mission, so while waiting for this, I'm gonna dig the uranium ore that would be needed to produce radiation and charge the temporal tear opener. Charging the temporal tear opener will require a significant amount of radiation, much more than the amount needed for research purposes. We will need a design that could generate massive radiation to complete the charging process in a reasonable time. There are three reasonable designs that come into my mind. First one is to use a nuclear reactor and intentionally make it melt down to collect the enormous radiation. That is how I completed Great Escape in my 100% Space Exposure Challenge series, but the reactor itself takes much more researches to unlock, and that is way too much for my single duplicant. Second way is to use the enriched uranium in manual radbolt generators. With a lot of high machinery duplicants, I was able to squeeze out massive amount of radbolts in a short time in my previous Great Escape speedrun. But this of course wouldn't work well either in a solo run. The plan I'm thinking about is the radiation lamp. It's not a popular radiation source and is often overlooked. But in my opinion, it's the best radiation source that can be unlocked with relatively basic research. It also has a small footprint, so it's easy to stack multiple lamps in a small concentrated area. It can only emit the radiation to the left or to the right, and it must have a tile behind it as the foundation. Initially, I thought about something like this. Using 6 lamps and 3 radbolt generators to collect the radiation, this setup could finish charging the temporal tear in about 11 cycles. But I want it to be done faster. I tested and calculated a lot of different setups, and finally decided to use this one. It's capable of finish the charging process in about 6 cycles. It would of course draw a significant amount of power, about 2000 watts for the entire process. That's why I want to bring a lot of hydrogen canisters as the power supply in this mission. At this stage, May is learning more skills than before, and she has a higher morale requirement of 6. It's time to upgrade her mess hall into a Great Hall for more morale. The Great Hall is actually a very cheap but powerful room. It could be finished extremely early. I was intentionally delaying this since I don't want to provide too much excess morale in the early game, so I could manage the duress to impress trait more easily. Producing radiation is not everything. We also need to assure the safety of May while doing space missions. The most dangerous part during the landing is the threat of suffocation. It's very important to make sure we have enough oxygen supply while using the Trailblazer to land until we are able to get the rocket to land. The common way is to prepare an Atmos suit with oxygen inside and have the duplicant trailblaze while wearing the suit. But gathering the materials and doing extra researches to produce Atmos suits would take a lot of time. I want to take the chance and use the oxygen masks. They carry much less oxygen, but the research and setup is also much more easier. We will need to perform multiple landings in different planets, so I want to prepare a lot of them in advance. We will still need a telescope on this rocket, so we can reveal more parts of the star map once we launch into space. The rocket control station is also needed, since this has to be an actually launchable rocket. May would also need more food, oxygen, and other materials to survive and complete the temporal tear mission. All of these would occupy the entire rocket interior, and we can only manage to use the small discharger instead of a large one. There is no chance at all we could fit a cot or an outhouse in the cockpit. It's definitely not the most comfortable rocket we can build, but consider we are using the duress to impress strategy, being stressed probably isn't as horrible as in a normal play. The food stockpile is getting dangerously low again. Usually, the free food from wild plants and critters should be able to sustain one duplicant. But May has the negative trait of bottomless stomach, which makes her consume 50% more food than normal, and that made all the difference. There's still some untouched buried food or critters around me, but I better be quick and finish packing up for the rocket before the situation gets even worse. If May were able to reach other new planets, there would be a brand new environment and more fresh free food to feed her. You might be wondering, why would we pick a duplicant with this bottomless stomach trait when there are a lot of harmless negative traits to pick from? The reason is because the main strategy we are relying on, the duress to impress trait, is a strong positive trait, and the game will always pair it with a strong negative trait to balance out. Some other possible strong negative traits include anemic, which is a -5 debuff on athletics, or mouth breather, which doubles the oxygen consumption. These would make the game even harder than the bottomless stomach. Some other traits would make May completely unable to dig or to build, which makes the run impossible. Overall, I decided bottomless stomach is the least of the evil and settle with it. Packing for the rocket trips would take a lot of time, so I have better start working on it. We will need to bring oxygen masks to survive trailblazing missions, lead, metal power banks, and uranium ore for building rocket platform, power system, and producing radiation, oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen canisters for surviving, rocket fuel, and power source. It seems not much when we just list it like this, but most of these entries requires multiple trips to deliver the amount I need for space traveling. The amount of uranium ore needed is all just calculated by theory. If I run short of it in the end of the run, it's gonna be very embarrassing. I decided to play safe and dig a bit more. At this stage, all of the food are sent into the rocket interior, and there is 0 left at home. The Great Escape is gonna be a one-way mission with no return, so I'm determined enough to take everything with me. It took me 8 cycles, from 55 to 63, to finish all the packing, but we finally have everything we need to launch into space. Ready or not, here we come. It might appear that our rocket have to travel 3 hexes to the next planet, but launching and landing happens almost instantly, so practically, we only have to wait for the rocket to advance by 1 hex. And one of the good part about the carbon dioxide engine is that it has a rather fast speed, and we would expect to arrive in slightly more than half a cycle. The storage bin we placed in the rocket was merely used to collect the materials. Once all the resources are on board, there is no problem deconstructing the storage bin and just drop everything on the ground. We do need this space because we have to build a battery, otherwise there would be a significant power waste. As we approach the orbit of this new planet, we need to deploy the contents of Orbital Cargo Module onto the planet's surface. Each package of the module can hold up to 200 kilograms of cargo. If we want enough metals to build a rocket platform, we need at least 2 packages on top of the Trailblazer lander. But merely bringing 2 packages worth of metal is very risky, because the packages would be dropped randomly on the surface. If the 2 packages are too far away from each other, we will be unable to fetch and unpack both packages in time before the oxygen runs out. So I decided to over-prepare and fill in 6 packages of metal in the orbital cargo module. We can first deploy the cargo, observe their location, and pick the 2 closest package as our Trailblazer landing zone. For example, these 2 packages are close enough, and I'm tempting to just land between them. But I am not rushing to land yet. I want to finish scouting the nearby star map with the telescope first, because we still need to find the 4th and 5th planet to land. The other reason is that the duplicant health status will be completely reset once we deploy the Trailblazer. So we can make May work in this poor environment for a while longer, and do the trailblazing action before it gets out of hand. After landing, May would be healthy and refreshing for quite a few cycles. We have scouted for another half a cycle. It's time to clean up the mess and land on the new planet. We don't even have the room for an oxygen mask checkpoint, so we have to manually select a mask on the ground and assign it to May before deploying the Trailblazer. This is quite micro-intensive, but when we have only one duplicant to control, what else are we supposed to focus on anyway? Colony lost, huh? This is not real, but an inevitable bug when we are doing a solo run. During the Trailblazer landing process, the duplicant would be considered non-existent in the world, so the game thought we lost all the duplicants and the colony. After May gets out from the lander, we of course still have control of the colony. May has just fallen asleep. This is definitely not the best time to take a nap. Let's wake her up with our old friend, Red Alert. Her stress level has been reset due to the landing, so we do want to stress her back to above 60% to get back the duress to impress Buff. We have to unpack 2 cargo packages, deconstruct the lander, build the rocket platform before we can land the rocket. All of these have to be done before oxygen runs out. The oxygen mask contains 20 kilograms of oxygen, and at this stage, we still have 6 kilograms left. May should be safe for now. Once the rocket landed, we can explore this planet comfortably. Even if the oxygen mask runs out of air, May can hold her breath long enough to return to the rocket. Some natural oxygen packets can also be found in this planet, which definitely helps. Our primary goal is to build a mini-pod in this planet to indicate we colonized this planet. But we also want to grab the free food here to sustain May in the space travel missions ahead of us. This cactus-looking thingy is called Hexcellent Fruit. It is very calorie dense and contains 6,400 kilocalories per fruit. They are perfect for our long interplanet travels. The fruits are scattered all around the planet, and May has to run back and forth to gasp for air, so the digging mission will sure take some time. But since we now have the food and oxygen, we are not that desperate to leave the planet. We can take our time to gather all the food and finish the telescope scouting here. The stress level has been back to above 60%, which is good, but May is in a big morale deficit, and the stress will continue to build up quickly. We don't really want the stress to reach 100%, so I'm gonna build a quick natural reserve to satisfy her morale requirement. With most of the natural plants preserved, it's easy to find a small area with 4 plants and enclose it with doors to make the natural reserve room. Here we go. This should be enough to slow down the stress reaction crisis. Now, it's time to prepare for the next rocket launch. We have brought a lot of gas canisters with us on the rocket, and we merely have to use the canister drainer to drain the carbon dioxide canister into pipes so we can refuel the rocket. The Trailblazer lander is used up when we landed on the planet. I gotta make sure to rebuild a new one so I can do another landing. It's gonna be very embarrassing to approach a new planet orbit only to realize the Trailblazer lander was missing. The orbital cargo module has to be refilled so it can deploy again, for the same reason. Now, the last thing we need to do is to activate the mini-pod so it counts for the Great Escape requirements. But actually, it's activated already. The light from it wouldn't show due to the same bug when we landed. Remember this colony lost message when we landed on this planet? The game thought we have no duplicants left while we are landing, and the colony is over, even if we are actually still in the game. When the colony is considered lost, all the printing pods and mini-pods will be turned off, and no longer be able to print new duplicates. It's easy to fix this weird situation. We just have to save and reload to inform the game that we are still alive, and we will see the mini-pod shining again. Now it's time to take off and find our next planet to land. We have collected enough food to survive for another 12 cycles, so May only have to reach the 4th planet before that. In the current star map, we have 3 question marks that could possibly be a planet. Our rocket can only move 6 hexes before it has to land and refuel, so we can't reach all 3 locations in one trip. But we don't have to. The telescope can reveal the question marks from 3 hexes away, so we can just travel in this small inner circle while scouting, and only actually move towards these question marks when it is confirmed to be a planet. No matter which of the 3 question marks turns out to be a planet, we will have enough fuel to reach it. It turns out this closest question mark is indeed a planet. That's of course good news, but May's stress is quickly building up due to insufficient morale. We need more than half a cycle to reach the new planet? Could May possibly hold the stress long enough? Not really. 1/5 of a cycle away, and she is already at 97% stress. We have to force an emergency sleeping to temporarily hold back the stress gain. Hopefully, the 20% stress relief is enough to pass the remaining travel time. The stress has stopped growing at 99% and even reverted to 98% for now. That's another crisis saved by sleeping. Now it is the time to deploy the orbital cargo module again. We have a nice landing spot here with 3 packages next to each other. It's time to put on another oxygen mask and trailblaze onto the surface. The stress level is once again reset to 5% by the trailblazing action, and we are welcomed by another colony lost message. I guess we have to keep watching this colony lost thingy in this run. We unpacked 2 packages and deconstructed the lander just like in Last Planet. But we still don't have enough lead to build the rocket platform. What's going wrong? Well, one package was stuck and buried inside this tile when being unpacked. We just have to dig it out from the tile to get the metal back, but this can be very confusing and make unexperienced players panicking. I forgot to mention in the last landing, but rockets only require a pilot to take off. They can continue to fly or land without duplicant operation, so our unmanned rocket can land on its own once the rocket platform is constructed. The mission in this planet is almost the same as the last one. Land on the surface, build a mini-pod and activate, refuel rocket, collect food, and take off to the next planet. But the food source here is not quite the same. The only edible things are these moos roaming in mid-air. It feels bad to eat these lovely critters, but they're worth 16,000 kilocalories per cow, and they will reproduce in a weird way. They would call in new moos into the planet with a meteor, and other exterior meteors will bombard this planet to bring more moos. We probably won't stay long enough to see this happen, but at least it's good to know they will replenish their numbers over time. The moos won't retaliate when we attack, but they will continue to fly randomly and might get too far from the duplicant, and the attacking task would be interrupted. This might take a bit longer than we expected, Come on, come on! I give up on this move. This one on the right looks easier. After collecting enough food for the rest of the run and activating the mini-pod, we are almost ready to go. There is one extra thing we can do, which is to remove the orbital cargo module so the rocket can fly much faster. But why wouldn't we need to first deploy the cargo in the next planet? We will see the reason when we actually land. Just like in the previous trip, we can scout the question marks from a further distance before deciding which way to go. These two question marks are possible planet nominee, but we don't have to care about these two because planets will never be adjacent to other question marks. This trip is gonna be much tougher than the last one. Not only because the travel time would be longer, but also May has absorbed too much radiation while working on the surface of the Mu planet, and she is now suffering from major radiation sickness. Duplicants suffering from major radiation sickness will experience many debuffs. An athletics penalty might be okay, since we aren't going anywhere inside a rocket. But vomiting would take away her calories, waste a lot of time, and cause her to step on vomit, which will further stress her up. Once again, since we chose to travel in such a budget rocket, we have to live with these consequences. Here, we have found a new question mark. Could this be a planet? Nope. It turns out even another question mark is adjacent to it, so neither of these two could be a planet. After half a cycle of scouting, we have some good news and bad news. The good news is, we found the Tundra planet, our most important destination before the temporal tear. The bad news is, May is almost stressing out again. I tried the emergency sleeping, but she is forced to wake up by the radiation vomiting and can't sleep properly. We have inevitably reached 100% stress, and we have to face the consequences, which is stress vomiting. I don't even know if both types of vomiting can coexist, or they will prevent each other from happening. Oh my, she's also making a mess at the same time. This is probably not a pleasant trip, but at least we have finally arrived at the Tundra planet orbit. Time to set the schedule back to normal and let the final landing begin. This is the surface of the Tundra planet. Have you guessed why we don't need to send orbital cargo first before landing? This mysterious unrevealed area is the Temporal Tear Opener, and its wall is made from lead metal tiles. There's no luck or randomness involved. These metal tiles are guaranteed, and I know I can get more refined metals by deconstructing these tiles once I trailblazed onto the surface. That's why I am confident to land without using the orbital cargo module. Where should I place the rocket platform though? I want it to be close to the opener to reduce the travel time of fetching resources from the rocket. I guess I'll just do it here. The oxygen supply might be concerning, but our oxygen mask still have 10 kilograms of oxygen, which is about half of its full capacity. Everything is under our control. With the rocket landed, the final phase of this run now begins. We just have to supply the temporal tear opener with enough rad bolts to charge it and fly to the temporal tear to complete the great escape. The Trailblazer module has completed its mission. Time to deconstruct it with honor. The next step would be to pipe the oxygen from our stored canister into this Tundra planet. Unlike the last two planets, we have to work here for a prolonged time, so we definitely don't want to run back and forth to the rocket just to gasp for air. We are working very close to the surface with space exposure, and you might be wondering if the air would be violently sucked into space. But there is no such thing as an active air-sucking force or explosive decompression in this game. The air would only passively and slowly diffuse out into the space, and a simple manual airlock would stop most of the air leak. Also, we have bring more than enough of oxygen, so there is really nothing to worry about. Why don't we use the mechanized airlock, which opens and closes faster than the manual one though? Well, because I haven't even researched it. We were only researching the absolute minimum of technology if you still remember. There are a lot of wild sleep weeds in this planet. They are very helpful, but not because of food. We have more than enough food thanks to the move from the last planet. It's because they can be made into an easy natural reserve. We definitely need these 6 morale from the natural reserve this time. The industrial zone, which includes the radiation-related buildings and power generators, would be placed here on the left. Those buildings would disqualify the natural reserve, so I have to add in more doors to separate them into different rooms. I just realized the oxygen here is still a bit thin because May keeps collapsing due to fatigue and the canister drainer runs out of oxygen without being resupplied. There's also a hole in the surface here because the pneumatic door doesn't stop airflow at all. I gotta wake May up and fix these. But May still keeps collapsing from fatigue. Exhausted again. This planet is very cold, and chilly surroundings will not only stress her up, but also drain her stamina much faster than normal. Her sleep will also be interrupted by the coldness. This is gonna be a real problem. Maybe getting her a proper bed and barracks will help a little bit? Now we gotta build a radiation setup. If you remember, I have already studied and experimented in advance, and I am planning to build a setup with 12 radiation lamps and 3 red bolt generators. Building in real game is different from in sandbox though. We need a proper build order, so every building is accessible, and we need a path for the duplicant to pass, a path for the rad bolt to travel later. Rad bolts are really dangerous. If they happen to hit the duplicant midair, not only the rad bolt will be wasted, but it will hurt the duplicant. It's the last thing we want to happen, so we need to make sure its trajectory will never overlap with the pathing of May. Another important thing is to make sure the power supply is stable. Rad bolt generators consume a huge amount of power to accumulate rad bolts, and the rad bolt storage will decay rapidly when the power is down. If the power keeps flickering on and off, the rad bolts would never generate properly, and it will be a significant waste of power and time. So the plan is like this. May would travel and stand under the entire rad bolt system to supply the radiation lamps with uranium ore. The rad bolts will shoot upwards and be reflected towards the right on this row. Duplicants only have a height of 2, so they are short enough to not run into the rad bolt trajectory. The power system will be built on this area with 3 hydrogen generators supplied by hydrogen canisters that we were saving up throughout the first half of this run. The entire system requires so many construction orders, and before May could finish all of them, the stress crisis is hitting us again. Even with emergency sleeping under high morale, I still couldn't stop May from stress vomiting this time. Why is she still making a mess though? Why didn't we have an outhouse in this planet? Well, because I forgot to bring dirt with me. There were a lot of natural dirt tiles in the 3rd planet, so it wasn't a problem then, and I didn't even think about it. I guess we will have to finish the Temporal tier mission without an outhouse. The stress level would be reset to 60% after the stress vomiting reaction, so we could at least have some time to work properly before the next stress reaction hits. Hydrogen generators, smart batteries, canister drainers, and gas pipes, everything is coming online. With the power system complete, it's time to start running the rad bolt system. The perceived ambient radiation isn't much initially, but as May finished delivering uranium ore to every radiation lamps, the radiation rapidly grows up to our expectation. This level of radiation is very dangerous to duplicants, but we aren't standing in the most radiation-intensive area when we deliver, and we won't be doing the delivering job too frequently, so the absorbed radiation dose should still be within the safe zone. Once the system starts working, it should run on its own most of the time, and we only have to make sure we refill the hydrogen canisters and uranium ore when needed. Now, we have the time to do some other jobs in parallel. We will need to refuel the rocket so it could fly to the temporal tear after the charger is successfully activated. Let's set up another canister drainer and start releasing carbon dioxide to the rocket. Wait a second, wait a second! I think I got something wrong. Why is the carbon dioxide piped into the planet? It's supposed to go into the rocket. I guess I mindlessly applied the setting to the wrong canister drainer. Gosh, the living quarters is now full of unbreathable carbon dioxide, but that's not the most scary part. If I don't have enough carbon dioxide left to reach the temporal tear, it's gonna be so embarrassing. Anyway, I'll try to collect them into a canister filler and hope I could get most of them back. The Mu planet is 5 hexes away from this tundra planet, and temporal tear is also 5 hexes away from Mu planet, so my rocket needs to travel for 10 hexes, which requires about 166 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, the stress vomiting triggered at this point again. But on the bright side, carbon dioxide is heavy and would tend to sink below oxygen. Hopefully, oxygen would be the gas that leaks to outer space and blocks carbon dioxide from doing so. After half a cycle of vomiting, we finally got the pump and the canister working. This accident is an unexpected power drainer though, and I'm not sure if I have enough hydrogen left to finish the temporal tear charging mission. I better get a hamster wheel running and hope this would make up for the extra power consumed by the gas pump. I decided to build a hamster wheel here instead, so I don't have to build more tiles to obstruct airflow. Now we can finally take a break and watch the radiation system working in action. It has been quite a mess, but I ended up collected 91 kilograms of carbon dioxide as canister in the cockpit, which allows the rocket to travel for 5 hexes and have fueled the rocket completely. The carbon dioxide crisis is now over. I'm kinda curious, how does my home planet look like now? It's occupied by a lot of chlorine, but a lot of oxygen still stayed at the electrolyzer zone. If this isn't a solo run, we could still print a new duplicant from the pod and resume developing this planet. Although, the pod isn't functioning right now because the game thought we are colony lost. There's a hidden problem with May running the hamster wheel. She will only stop running when the battery is charged above a certain level or when she has personal needs. But given the massive power drain of the radiation system, she's gonna run for a very long consecutive time and wouldn't switch to other jobs even if they are prioritized. The hydrogen supplying the generators is almost depleted, and we need to resupply them now. Even if the generators go down for only a few seconds, the current radbolt storage will be lost and the progress will be set back. I realized this because I happened to saw that May has a pending store hydrogen gas job. The canister drainer will not generate this job when its hydrogen storage is still high, so we can see this job only because the hydrogen is almost running out. Now that all the issues are fixed, we just have to monitor the charging process and wait until the opener is fully charged. I guess I have jinxed it. May's stress vomiting reaction happens when the hydrogen canister needs refilling, and there is no way I can get her to work until the vomiting is over. This time, the Radbolt generators were indeed shut down due to the power shortage. I hope I have brought enough hydrogen and uranium ore to cover this wastage. system is back online, and our charging process is already at 86%. We are just less than one cycle from finishing. Fortunately, there are no more surprises, and we managed to fully charge the opener. Now there's just one more step before we fire the opener. Save and reload again to tell the game we are not colony lost, and light up the printing pod again. Yes, we have completed the first go of establishing 5 colonies. Let's fire up the opener. When the opener activates, it shoots a big laser towards the sky and summons a bunch of meteors towards our surface. Wanna guess what's inside those meteors? It's fullerene, the critical ingredient to make supercoolant. That's a bliss for sure, but for this run, it's more important to know that rockets are immune to damage, so the meteors will not harm anything that is valuable to us. Our food stockpile can still sustain for another 10 cycles. 10 hexes in space might sound like a long travel, but our carbon dioxide rocket now only has the engine and the cockpit module left. Without having to carry the burden of the cargo and trailblazer module, this most basic rocket travels extremely fast, even faster than the most advanced hydrogen rocket. Demolier, the big meteor from DLC, is still threatening to hit our home planet after 100 cycles. Little does it know, we are leaving this world and hopping to another one in one cycle. We have arrived at the Moo planet once again. We merely need to stop and refuel the carbon dioxide here. The exterior gas pipes were already built in our last visit, so this is gonna be very fast. It is time to take off again, and start our very last rocket journey towards our ultimate goal. Well, here comes the final stress vomiting. If you ask me what could be improved in this run, I guess I could try to fit in a mess table in this rocket to deal with a part of the morale deficit, at least after the telescope is no longer needed. If we have used the larger cockpit version, we can definitely build a comfortable rocket for the journey. Unfortunately, it's impossible to fit in the large cockpit into the carbon dioxide engine. We could have tried to use a steam rocket to fit it, but the steam rocket requires way more research than the most basic carbon dioxide rocket, and steam rocket travels extremely slow. It's actually my most favorite rocket in normal colonies, but since we're determined to finish the Great Escape in 100 days, I am not confident at all that steam rocket could do the job in time. On the other hand, although a solo run sounds extremely slow and dragging, we enjoyed the time saved from not having to worry about growing food or taming geysers. Our initial resources allowed May to survive for a very long time. The fact we could completely ignore job priority also changes the way we play the game. It also made the duress to impress trait practical to use. On normal colonies, it will be a nightmare to manage multiple duplicants, each with different stress value and expectation. The final moment has come. Let us enter the temporal tear and embrace for another colony lost message. Oh well, we just can't stop this thing from haunting us. We have completed the most special achievement ever of beating the game and losing the game at the same time. I kinda wonder, how does our colony summary look like? Other than the Great Escape, we merely completed 9 achievements, a very focused run indeed. But the most funny part is this one. It's supposed to show the list of duplicants, but May is already gone, so we have 0 dupes and an empty page here. I also have to apologize because I lied to you. I promised to beat the game in 100 days, but it's just day 91 here. Since we still have some time left, Maybe you would like to watch these videos?